We're talking now with Dr. Derrell Peel, our OSU Extension Livestock Marketing Specialist. And Derrell, the big news in the ag industry this past week or so, New World Screwworm in the United States, and you're keeping track of the markets as the news has evolved.
Yeah, it's kind of a bad news, good news story, I guess. Part of it is we've been anticipating this for a long time. So from a broader market perspective, especially the futures markets, it was almost a sense of relief. And so, we've been waiting for this shoe to fall for many months now, and it finally has. So we got past that. Now we got to deal with the reality. And so, there is good and bad news in this. Broadly speaking, there's not a lot of big market impacts. That's the good news. But there's certainly a lot of impacts for the folks that are directly affected and everybody around that area.
So let's talk just first and foremost what this means for beef consumers. What messaging do you have for them?
Yeah, beef consumers should have absolutely no concerns about this. This is not an animal disease, an infectious disease. It's a pest. It affects specific animals, doesn't affect meat. Even infected animals, if they're treated early and recover, their meat's fine. There's other animals are not impacted. So there's no impact on meat. There's no food or food safety issues that should concern consumers at all.
Does this impact the fundamental supply of cattle or beef?
It really doesn't. That's the thing from a supply standpoint. I mean, this is going to affect a few animals, relatively small numbers. There may be some losses of animals in this depending on how big of a thing it turns into. But overall, it's not going to impact overall cattle inventories or beef production. So from a supply and a demand standpoint, there's really no major market impacts to this that should affect the market, broadly speaking.
Where we stand now, what are the biggest economic impacts?
The impacts, the bad news part of this, of course, is producers that are affected, the regions that are affected are going to face a lot of costs and management headaches. It takes a lot to get around this thing, both at the private level, individual producers and the industry, broadly speaking, in those areas especially, as well as the state, local, and federal officials that are involved in this. So there's going to be a lot of costs, a lot of management headaches to this thing. That are a big impact. It'll be a combination of private cost. Individual producers that are affected will certainly see, and they may lose a few animals, but at any rate, there's going to be a lot of cost to monitoring and treating animals and staying ahead of this thing, as well as obviously the public efforts from the federal level down, trying to get this back under control. We've been here before. It's been a long time. We had many years successfully controlling this pest. It's back now. It slipped by us, so we've got to deal with it again. So there are those costs involved, but it doesn't affect the overall market for cattle and beef.
And we know Extension, the role you play and our other Extension specialists and our county educators are key in supporting fellow agencies with the educational efforts, the testing, all of that.
Yeah, from my standpoint, it's about talking about the market issues. I've had lots of questions about whether this is a market impact, and it really isn't. So that's good news to reassure consumers that there's no meat impacts that they should be worried about. On the ground, Extension plays a pretty important role in that monitoring and supporting testing and submitting samples and those kinds of things to try to facilitate the on-the-ground, the boots-on-the-ground kind of efforts to get control of this thing.
So stick with the facts and sprinkle in a little optimism is what it sounds like.
Yeah, from a market standpoint, there's not a lot of issues, and I've had questions about that. So no major market concerns. Like I said, the market was almost relieved just to get it over with, but we have to deal with it now. So, that still lies ahead of us. We don't quite know how big it's going to get, but we're on top of it.
All righty, Derrell Peel, thanks a lot, and we'll see you again soon.